All right, this is Zachary Beckedall, National Master, coming back and Poder Academy chess instructor for our second lesson in our 12-part series. Today we're working on checkmating the king. Last lesson we went over how to move all the pieces. We went over check and checkmate and stalemate and how to castle your king. So at this point you should be able to move all your pieces around and know all the special moves in chess. And now we're going to get into the most important part, which is checkmating your opponent and how to actually win the game. So we talked about checkmate and what it was last time, but there's two really popular patterns that you're going to use in 90 or 95% of your games when you're ahead and you're trying to finish the game and actually win. And what we're trying to do is avoid stalemate, like we talked about last time, which is a draw or a tie. There's also some other ways to get draws that could hurt you here. Like if you floundered around for a really long time and it took you more than 50 moves to checkmate, there's actually a draw in tournament chess. We call a 50-move draw. And if you move back and forth 3 times that you didn't know where to go, then you get a draw from 3-move repetition. So you want to know what you're doing, and you want to finish your game as quick as you can. I really like to teach kids to checkmate quickly so that they finish their games faster too. If you finish up, you win your game, and you can just clean your hands off real quick and finish, then you can play more chess games. So this first one is what we call the Rook ruler checkmate, and it's a very quick checkmate that doesn't take a lot of time. And here on the board we have 2 rooks. But also, it's very popular to do this checkmate with a queen and a rook, or 2 queens since they move just like rooks, and that makes it even easier. And that happens a lot since last practice we also said when the pawns make it all the way to the end of the chessboard and they get up to the top, you can get a queen back. So you'll see this checkmate a lot then. So when we start this checkmate, we're just going to use the rooks. We really don't need our king for this one, which is nice. So if you're playing a game, your king's back safe, just leave him there. And when we start, we're going to put our rooks on the edge of the board. So like we said last time, our rooks can move straight in any direction as far as they want. And we're going to just put them both. We're just going to take time to get the rooks all the way to the edge. Put them on the side. And that's important because if you put the rooks in the middle and try to checkmate the king's going to catch up to him quicker. And really, the rooks are a long-range piece, so use them as well as you can. Use them to best their ability. Let them use their long range. Now, the next move is really important as we start this drill, and we're going to play this rook up to this square. Now, that's where walls this king off, since the rook can go all the way across the board and sets a wall. Wherever that king is going to be where we put our rook. So if this king were all the way up here, maybe on a starting square, this drill would be really easy. We'd just start our drill by bringing our rook all the way up and walling off right under the king. So we go right under the king here. And that way, now you have a wall. That king is already in a very small amount of squares, and he can't go anywhere. So now if he comes like over here, what we'll do next is the next rook would come up, and this will be our finishing position. Right here, you've guarded all the squares the king can get to. He's under attack by this rook, so we know it's check, not stalemate. And he has no squares he can get to. So since he's completely walled off, this move would still be checked from that rook. This move would still be check. And since all of his options are still check, if he goes here, it's check. If he makes this move, it's check. And if he comes diagonal, it's check, and he can only go one at a time, then we have checkmate here. So this is what we're looking for, and this is what we want to get. So again, we start off, our rooks go to the edges, and then one rook comes up and walls the king off. And then the next turn, what happens is the second rook comes up to the row the king's on and attacks it. And what that does is it forces the king up. So now we have the row under covered, we've got the row the king's on covered, and he's forced to make a move upward to the next row. And now we've just got a smaller wall that we're working up, and that makes it easy. Now you'll see here, if we put our rook up to this square and put the king in check, he's going to be able to take us and get out of check, which is allowed. So you've got to be careful here, and instead swing your rook over to the other side. Now we swing him all the way over the other side so he's as far away from the king as possible without locking the rooks up. Because if you put the rooks so they're right over the top of each other, next turn when you try to go your rook up, he's going to be blocked and you can't jump over the top of this rook. So we move our rook right to this square, and then black's going to make a move. Now, black's best move is probably staying on this row 5. It doesn't really make a difference. If he moves his king up, we're going to do the same thing. And sometimes there's a misconception here that if black plays really, really well, he can get out of this checkmate, and that's not true. If white plays all the right moves, black cannot get out of checkmate. So the rook comes up. Now, again, we have this row guarded, and this rook attacks, so it's check, and that forces the king up. We want to always move the bottom rook up. If you move this rook on top up, what happens is the king can go back down because you didn't guard the squares underneath. So each time, you've got to keep that rook that's walling the king off there, and then move the rook that's now not doing anything up 2 squares and attack the king. And then each move, we keep moving the rook underneath up, so it attacks the king. And when the king goes up, we'll just keep working him up the board. Now, this rook's doing that important job of walling off, then we move our other rook, and when we get to the top of the board, we play rook up, checkmate. So again, like we said last video, I'm not going to go over these 2 or 3 times. So if you didn't get that or you want to see it again, rewind your tape and make sure you have that down. And I would set up a board on the side, of your TV or of your computer, and try that out a few times, and try playing the black and white side, and make sure you have that down. I'll just go over it real quick one more time. The only thing you want to watch out for is, remember, as you get those rooks over, if the king walks his way over to one rook, just remember to flip sides so you don't get taken. And then if you ever mess up and something goes terribly wrong, just remember that, if you get all confused, that wherever the king is, whatever row he's on, if he's on the 6th row, just put your rook underneath him and wall off on the 5th row, and you'll be able to restart. And as you get better and better at this drill, you'll be able to do it in different ways. For example, if your opponent's king happens to be on this edge, maybe then what you want to do is checkmate him over here, because we have a square. You'd be able to put your rook on this here, and then your rook could go to the top, and this rook could come back over, and now we have a checkmate just sideways, but the exact same thing. So be creative with it, and after you get good at it, you can do it in different ways. And remember, you can do this with 2 queens too. I should show that real quick. So if you have 2 queens, the nice thing about 2 queens when you're trying to checkmate the king is that now you don't even have to flip sides, because the king's not even allowed to go close to those queens, so he can't take the queens. And let's just give white another move. Even if it was white's move here, you can move your queen right next to the king, because the king is not allowed to take this queen, because that would be check. So it makes it real easy with the queens. You can really just roll them right up the board, and when you get to the end, you'll have checkmate with the 2 queens too. So either way you want to do it, that'll be just fine. And the last checkmate we're going to show here, which is a little bit tougher, is the 1 queen checkmate. This one's really important because as you're playing your game, you'll have a lot of close games, hopefully, against some tough opponents you're playing. And if it comes right down to it, maybe you're left with just 1 pawn on the board, and you're able to get that pawn across and get a queen, then you can take the rest of your opponent's material, and you have to be able to win with just this 1 queen. This one's also tough because the queen moves so many different directions that you have a lot of stalemates you have to watch out for. So we've got to do this one carefully. Where the 2 rooks one, as long as you just follow those 2 or 3 rules, you almost always get checkmate. This one, a lot of people mess up and get stalemates. This one's worth going over a few times. This one's always pesky and people mess up the first few times. So, same thing as before. Whenever you're trying to checkmate the king, we got to put him in a box. We got to make it a mating net, is what we call it in chess. And so here we start, we bring the queen out, and we wall off the king here. And now the king's limited to just these squares, this row. And we're just going to make that row smaller and smaller and smaller until we get to the end of the board, and then we'll have a checkmate. So here when the king scoots over, the way that we push him back. Remember last time we had 2 rooks, we were able to just kind of, row by row scoot him up. This time we're actually going to have to use the king. So in the last drill when we started, we had to use both rooks, and the king just got to sit back and hang out. In this drill, the king's got to be more like Braveheart. He's got to be part of the action, helping out. So the queen comes over here. It's going to attack the king, and this is how we're going to push the king back. Now, the king can't take the queen again. You always have to be careful because the kings are too close there. So each time we move the queen in, we're going to make sure it's protected by the king, and that's going to force our opponent's king back. And black's got to make sure he stays out of check. He's going to go to that square. And then each time this black king moves backward, white is going to wall off with the queen. So now he's pushed the black king back to the 5th row. We're going to move the queen over to the 4th row. Now, we can't go to this square or this square on the 4th row, because then the white king is back here and the black king can take it. So each time, we've got to make sure we stay out of the way and wall off. Now when the black king moves, the white king steps in, and then and the white king's going to go towards the black king to make sure he helps out. Because remember, he's trying to help out and help the queen. A really good tip on this one is make sure you don't put the queen and the king on the same row. that really messes you up. We're going to make sure the king is one row below the queen. So if the queen's on the 4th row, our king's on the 3rd row. And now when this king scoots over, we're going to move the queen over to this row and attack the king. So now that forces the king back again, because remember the queen guards all these rows, she can go diagonal or straight, and so the king has to go back, and then whenever the king goes back, we wall off. And so now you've seen kind of the 3 steps. If you just follow those 3 steps again and again, it makes it easy. We wall the king off, step 1, then we bring our king in, step 2, and then whenever our king is close enough to help out, let's say this king runs away for a while, we just keep chasing him, the 3rd step is push the king back. So then whenever you push the king back, you're going to need your queen directly under his king. A lot of people make the mistake of putting it over the top of your king. You want it directly over his king so that you can guard all the squares and he has to go back. And then every time he moves back, you just wall off. So really get those 3 steps down in your mind. I'm going to wall that king off. I'm going to bring my king in to help. And then I'm going to push him back by putting my queen over the top. And you can just do that all the way till you get to the end of the board and you'll get a checkmate. We'll see what we have to watch out for here. And we talked about this last time when we were talking about stalemate, is when that king gets to the end of the board, he only has a few squares. So now if you bring your king up, remember this is the rule we were trying to avoid, where the king and the queen are on the same row. If we bring our king up, now this king has no squares to go to, but he's not in check. So this is stalemate, and instead of winning the game in a tournament or in a game of chess, now you get a tie game after all of that hard work. And so we're just a few seconds away from winning. Make sure you go slow as you get to the end of this drill. And we want to do the same things before. We're going to move our queen first, and we're going to wall off. And so now we have a wall. This king's only moves right here. Second step, bring our king in. And then we finish this drill by bringing our queen over the top and checkmating the king. And so now the king's in checkmate because he's not allowed to take. Again, he's too close to the white king. And he has no squares that he can get to. And since it is check, that's always the difference, this king's in checkmate. And so this drill is a really good one to know. You're going to use this one a lot. I really like this drill especially because as you get good at chess and you're playing other chess games, you can kind of see this one where we have the queen right over the top and it checkmates the king. And we're going to use lots of different pieces to set this up. So although we need to know this drill and be able to checkmate our opponent with just our queen and king, also in the beginning of the game, say our opponent castles and his king's over here, and you can kind of imagine some more pieces that are on the board. We'll have different positions that are maybe like this, and here we have checkmate in 1, basically using that exact same drill. So think about it for just a second, and if you remember the pattern we just used, you'll be able to solve this. We're going to play queen to the square right over top the king, and now the king is not allowed to take us because the bishop guards, and it's checkmate. The exact same thing we just did, except now the bishop guards. And so you can be creative in chess again and do it in all kinds of different ways, and you can kind of set up these checkmates. And so chess is all about pattern recognition, and maybe you have the same pattern that you set up in just a little bit different way, and you can get some checkmates. And so I'll give you another problem real quick as we're doing this. Let's say it's this position right here. I'll give you a second to either pause the tape or try to solve this. Again, white's move is just queen right over the top of the king, and this time our knight helps out. It goes up 1, 2, and over, and checkmates the king. So try to use these exact same drills in lots of different ways and be creative with it, and then they'll really be useful for you. But especially today, the goal is that if you get to the end of the game and you know how to move your pieces and you can take your opponent's pieces, that you'll at least be able to finish the game and get a checkmate with either those 2 rooks or the 1 queen. So we've got more strategy coming up. Next time we're going to work on pins and forks in the opening, and we'll be excited to see you then. Thanks for listening.